warm welcome from our side, from Asma, Harry, and myself, Sophia. So it's amazing to have you here on a Saturday. It's 1st of May, so it feels really like spring right now. And I think spring is an amazing time to learn something new, new topic, but also get in touch with new people. And it's amazing that you spend your time with us today, 1 hour about blockchain. But before we start with the content, so to say, and dig deeper into the basics of blockchain, we would do some general stuff, some overall stuff, and also, of course, introduce ourselves. So for all the newbies in the session who jumped in later, please use your chat. Try out if your chat is working and enter your location, where you're located right now, and what is your dial-in location. And this is the first proof is if your chat is working, because this should be a dialogue, right? We call it tech dialogue, the woman in tech dialogue. And dialogue means we want to interact with you on the one hand via the chat. So whenever you have a question, don't hesitate to ask, write it in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask a question. We are not that big not that many people in the room, so it should be manageable also if we speak. And this is exactly the intention of this call, right? We want to come in a dialogue with you and have an exchange around technology, and also, of course, with great people. So also Olena and Natalie are now in. Great to have you here. And for all the new people, please take the chat and enter your location in the chat. As we have seen already, it's great. We have people from America here, from China, from Stuttgart, from Europe overall, really, really cool. And yes, we start our What is Blockchain session. So really first session for Tech Dialogue. It's about the basics of blockchain. And let me start with a presentation. You can see some hashtags here below, and also our bloXmove account. So it would be great if you have time and also you like social media, help us with the social media firework. Maybe do some tweets, some posts, and use the 3 hashtags if you want to post something. Very important, the Women in Tech hashtag, because this is our basic intention to bring more women around the topic of blockchain, but also general in technology, and make women and great women visible, right? And it's always cool that we have strong he for she, so also men who supporting us with that. And it's amazing to see also here Bernd, Andreas, Lucas around us to help us in connecting and also making us visible. So we move on with our presentation. What's our plan today? What's on agenda? Welcome. We are already into the session and directly jumped into the topic and in the welcome. So I move on with who we are, that you have a feeling who is Harry, Asma, and Sophia, who's speaking to you today. Then we move on with our blockchain session. So the basics about blockchain. And as I said, let's live a dialogue. So ask your questions. It's the time today for all the questions, and there's no stupid question. If I had my first exchange with Harry and with Asma, right, it was really we started really from A to Z and ask everything. And then we finish our session with an outlook and also about with a feedback, because of course we want to let you first of all participate, but also want to get your feedback if we should move on with such sessions, if it's worth it to spend the time here. This is how we want to finish and close the 1 hour session today. Good. Who we are, I said already the names. Asma, maybe 1 sentence about yourself, who you are, our COO at bloXmove.
Yes, so my name is Asma Jamil, and I was born in Iraq, raised in US, and have lived abroad, maybe 4 other countries. And I'm happy to be here and be involved in this technology that's just shaping the world right now.
Cool. Harry?
Yeah. My name is Harry. I'm currently still working for Daimler Mobility at the head of the blockchain factory. And if these wonderful women will accept me, I might possibly become the future CTO of bloXmove.
So we will see. It's like an assessment today, right? So
Yes.
great. My name is Sophia, and yeah, I have the honor to be CEO of bloXmove. You can also see our Twitter accounts here from Harry and myself if you want to follow us, and also yeah, keep the dialogue also after this session. And yeah, we are happy to be the hosts of the session today. What is bloXmove? Because now you heard that name several times. bloXmove is our startup, our new venture. We founded the venture beginning of this year, and our vision is that we reinvent mobility. Means we want to change this fragmented mobility, urban mobility market, and we want to use blockchain technology for that. And I guess maybe not today, because today it's about the basics, as I said, but in one of the next sessions, we definitely want to dig deeper with you also in real use cases, right? And this is one of our vision. We want to build the bridge between this technology on the one hand, but the real life on the other side, and also real customer problems. And what we want to solve with bloXmove is one pain point, as I said, the fragmented mobility. We want to offer a global alliance with mobility where end users like you can really have seamless journeys from A to B, with no hassles in between, and tons of mobility apps on smartphone and so on. So that's maybe as a few high-level words about our basic idea. Good. And then I would hand over to Asma, why we are here, right? Women in tech, right?
Yes, Sophia. So thank you. Actually, this started maybe months ago and years ago when I first started hearing Harry talk about blockchain. And for years, every time I would talk to Harry, he would mention something about blockchain. And then this year, when I also was getting into this topic, I said, okay, Harry, I need to have sessions on this. So first I joined bloXmove as the CEO, and then I also had separate discussions with Jessica, who's in China. And we said, okay, Harry, we need sessions on this because we have no idea what this does, this technology, and how does it impact our life, our daily life? And what are the benefits of this today, tomorrow? And then, you know, how does it actually shape the world? So Jessica and I said, okay, Harry, we need some sessions. And we had a few sessions with Sophia joining and Pia also joining. I don't know if she's on the call right now or not, but we said, okay, this is really interesting. Now we need more women to be involved in this. And then I was talking to some friends, Sophia and Jessica and Pia, and we realized actually a lot of people want to know this technology. They want to know what is blockchain, how does it impact them? What does it mean for the world right now? And then we said, okay, let's do women in technology. Let's have these sessions. So we had some and we found it very interesting. And we said, okay, Harry, now we want to open it to all of our friends around the world. And we come from various regions, Europe, Asia, America, and we've all traveled. We have a lot of friends globally. And then from there, we want you to help us all understand this technology. So Harry, are you prepared to help us all understand this?
Hopefully.
I was born ready.
Okay.
Cool.
So I
Then
hand it over
you...
to Harry. Oh, sorry.
Great. I give you the host rights, Harry, so that you have control of the slides. And as we said, and thank you, Asma, to mention it again, it's a dialogue, right? So whenever you have a question, there's no stupid question, especially not in the blockchain area. Yeah, Harry.
Yes. So first check. You hear me? Sophia, you hear me?
Yes, and we can see the slides really good.
Yep.
Blockchain. What is blockchain? It's well, first of all, it's an exciting, disruptive, beautiful technology. That's me speaking here. But it's also something that will most probably change the world, at least in the digital space. You can think of it as really a replacement almost of the current internet. And in order to explain it, you need to go back to the origins. So we will start with the blockchain, which is really the well-known one, which is called Bitcoin. And as I speak and try to explain what happens here and how it happens, I will, for most of the time, refer to Bitcoin as an example. It's the most straightforward, most simple, and in many ways, most beautifully structured blockchain of all. And the scenario I will start with, there is a concept of a transaction. And I will be coming back to transaction many, many times. So what is a transaction? And that's important to remember. A transaction is normally in the business world, it is, I give you something, a good or a service, and you give me money. Now, blockchain is all about the record keeping. So the one of these two legs is usually not within the blockchain, usually not. At bloXmove, that will be done differently, but the whole blockchain is about the record keeping. And that is where one of the synonyms for blockchain is very useful to remember. You will oftentimes hear blockchain also known as DLT. And what is DLT? Distributed ledger technologies. Now that is still not very clear unless you know that a ledger is just an old-fashioned word for book. And it's a book with 2 pages, you know, with a double-page book. And the ledger is the book in which the bookkeepers, the accountants, keep track of how much money is owed, by whom, to whom, and how much money is in the cash box. That's a ledger. So blockchain is a way to count and keep track of financial transactions where, and you will also, whenever you Google it, you will always see these very famous 2 people. They're called Alice and Bob. And Alice and Bob are very, very famous because they are always used as examples in cryptography, which is the basic mathematical or software concept at the bottom of blockchain. And it's also the reason why these things are called crypto, as in cryptology, cryptocurrencies. So Alice and Bob conduct a transaction. And the reason they're called Alice and Bob is because the one begins with A and the other one begins with B. And a Bitcoin transaction is fairly simple, which you can all imagine. So Harry, let's say I have a Bitcoin, which will be quite a lot of money. It's about $50,000 now. And it wasn't when I started. And Harry now sends this, Harry is Alice. So, and Harry now sends Bob 50,000 Bitcoins. And now I will start the scenario, just to set the frame about what this network is and how it functions. So there will be the beginning of a transaction with a transaction request. So you need to read this way. So from the left to the bottom, then it crosses over and goes from the right to the top. So it's a U basically you're going to read here. So when I conduct this transaction, where on my side, I just say send 1 Bitcoin to, then this transaction will be broadcast, which means it will go from my node, I will get back to that. So my Bitcoin piece of software, which I will be having, it will now send out more or less to everybody like a radio broadcast. It will send out to all the others, Harry claims to have 1 Bitcoin or more, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to transfer one. And he wants to send it to an address that belongs to Asma. All right, now let's check. So what happens then? Well, then happens something called validation. So, and this is the whole secret of how blockchain works. So there's a lot of details in the next slides to come. So all these nodes do a lot of talking among each other. They do a lot of mathematics. They do a lot of computing. And they try to make sure that this is a transaction which should be allowed. And should be allowed means basically in this case that I really have the money, that I'm entitled to send it, and most of all, that I don't send it to 2 people at the same time. Because in something like blockchain, there's no bank in the middle. There's no company in the middle. There's no government in the middle. There is nothing in the middle. This is open source software. It belongs to no one. It belongs to everyone. It's controlled by no one. It's controlled by everyone. It's 110% transparent, but there is no organization. So you cannot go to the bank and check, does he have money in his bank account or so? The only party to ask is your node, your piece of software, and your node will ask the other nodes, and together they will decide. After all of this kind of runs through, and that is where the magic happens, then something, and that's a very, very important word to remember, and in all of blockchain, I believe it's the most beautiful word to remember, which is the word consensus. So once the transaction has been validated, consensus has been reached among the nodes, and this transaction will be committed to the blockchain. And we will explain later what the blockchain is. The important part is the consensus word, because very rarely does a very technical term so perfectly match the normal human understanding of the very same term as in society, or as in family, or as in company. Consensus among humans just means we agree. We are on one page on this. We see the same thing, and I know what you see is what I see, and I know we interpret it the same way, and you believe the same thing. That's what's called consensus. It's actually a very nice concept, right? It smells of peace and happiness and harmony. Now, in technology, it's actually doing the same thing. It's basically now there's a lot of nodes here, and they need to make sure that nothing is wrong, nothing is fake, nothing is untrue. And they do that by some very magical software engineering and some very magical cryptography. And then they reach consensus. And then they know not only that this has been true, but they know, and that's the important part about consensus, they know that all other nodes in the network know that the same fact is true. And that is the secret of the overall trust that the network has, because all of this can be verified through the necessary cryptography and the mathematics. So, and once this transaction now, the one I sent 1 Bitcoin to Asma, so Asma is now $50,000 wealthier, it doesn't get processed transaction by transaction. What actually gets done is you take about 10, 15 of those, and you basically process them in parallel. And once consensus has been reached that all of these 10 or 15 transactions are indeed valid, they get put into a block. And that block now gets connected to all the blocks that came before it. And so it gets what? It gets added, it gets linked to the chain of previous blocks. So a transaction happens between two parties, a lot of magic happens, consensus is reached, the transactions are put into this block, and the block is linked to the chain of previous blocks. And that is why it's called a blockchain.
So Harry, just to also first send me that coin. I want that coin. Send me that Bitcoin as soon as possible. But just to help me also and everyone else kind of get on this, it doesn't care. Blockchain does not care. I am in US, I have these regulations or any of that stuff, or where anybody is from. So maybe also help us. And then that, please.
Anarchy. It's
Yeah.
pure, beautiful anarchy.
Yeah, so I think we need to understand this, because for me, when you first told me that, I was like, oh, this is great. I love this, you know. And for those that are on the session, please ask any question. I mean, we had a question, what is P2P? I also asked that same question of Harry, you know, months ago when we started this. So please ask any questions, because I ask tons and tons of questions. So go ahead, Harry.
So this is the first of hopefully, or maybe several series. So this is the most technical we get. So if you survive and still your interest survives this session, you've made it through. And if not, I do apologize, because this is now the part, this paragraph is the one where really every single word counts. And unfortunately, I will also have to explain every single word, because it lies at the bottom of everything else that comes. Blockchain is a decentralized peer-to-peer, and I'll stop here. I'm not sure what the age group out there is. Some of you might know what peer-to-peer is from the days when there was Napster, BitTorrent, or the original Skype. Peer-to-peer means it's software where I download one copy of the software, you download another copy of the software, and the function that the software gives, for instance, BitTorrent is essentially a distributed file storage. So somebody puts files in it and you can find them and you can share them. It's a big file storage system. And it works, however, without any server, no client server, again, no company, no organization behind it. Purely, I download a BitTorrent node. Node is a copy of the program in a peer-to-peer network. P2P stands for peer-to-peer. Peer, the English word is one among equals, a peer among equals. So those of you that are British will know the term. Many people do not. It's just a peer is somebody who is not below anybody and not above everybody. It's actually the most noble form of existence, in my personal opinion. It just means I'm equal. And in the software world, it stands for equal software, no client, no server, equal. So, and they communicate among each other, and they just, can have more of them, you can have less of them, but all the logic and all the function is in that piece of software, and everybody has exactly the same copy. So that's the peer-to-peer part.
We have one good question here with the peer-to-peer part. Olena asked how the node is, how is it created, and is it you install a piece of software? How can I get a node, so to say?
It's a piece of software. Think of it as very similar to an app, but you just download a piece of software and spin it up, meaning you turn it on, and then these peer-to-peer softwares are always very network driven. So it then has its own way, its protocol. Protocol is a language that is spoken on the internet by computers. So protocol is a big word for language among computers. So it takes this protocol and it knows who to ask and where to ask, and then it finds the other nodes, and then they talk to each other and they refer each other further. There's a big cluster of nodes right there, another cluster of nodes right there, and then it basically meshes itself into the fabric of the other nodes. So a node is just a piece of software which you download and run. So, and decentralized is pretty much already connected to this concept, but the word decentralized, you will see that lately a lot. So whenever decentralized identifiers, decentralized blockchain, etc., it's essentially the same thing. The center usually being the server, the company, the government. That's a center that controls things. And decentralized means there is no control center. It's peer-to-peer, joint, basis democracy among computers, and jointly they decide what happens, and jointly they decide what's true or not. So that's the whole decentralized peer-to-peer part. Now, shared ledger of transactions. Transaction is, as I said, it's essentially a business transaction, meaning we agree on a service digitally, it's delivered, and assuming it has been delivered and confirmed, then somebody needs to pay for it. That's what transaction means in this context. Ledger is, again, it's where you keep the books based on what service was delivered at what price and what terms was agreed upon. Then I need to, at the end of these transactions, I need to keep a book about who is going to pay whom how much money. That's the ledger for the bookkeeping. And shared means we jointly, it's not that you have your SAP in your company and that's your SAP, and then the other company has another bookkeeping system and that's their bookkeeping system. No, no, no. This is, remember peer-to-peer, this is we all share a global truth. It's a global ledger, which all of us together, everybody who's on the Bitcoin network, shares one ledger. There is one absolute set of truth. It's completely transparent. You know exactly how many Bitcoins are in there, and you know exactly which wallet owes how many Satoshis or Bitcoins or whatever, and there is no separation between my book and your book. No, it's one big book of which all of us have an identical copy. And it is forged, meaning created, meaning linked together in an unbreakable way by consensus. I mentioned earlier, that's this very important concept. And that results in what? It results in that any of the participants, meaning anybody who's willing to play the game, can see the complete history, and the complete history will always, of course, include the present state. And this whole thing is immutable, which is a big word for nobody can change it. But the word immutable, again, you will see it a lot. I don't know why they just didn't say unchangeable or irreversible, but they came up with immutable, and so it is. It just means you cannot change it. So now, putting all of this together, where does this even make sense? Why should we use this? Well, start with the shared ledger part. We are now living more and more in a society where you hear the word ecosystem, where there's lots of companies across the internet, they do business among each other. You got international supply chains trawling all over the planet, you know, where over 10 countries, 5 continents, and I don't know how many companies, things get put together before they end up being, I don't know, a truck driving in New Delhi. So you have a lot of fragmented companies, you got global supply chains, you got global business, and this allows you to share the business facts, the transactions among them in a very easy and very trustworthy manner. So that's the shared ledger. That's actually the key concept and the key benefit. When or if people use blockchain, they will be using it because it's a shared ledger. And the other two now, trust and immutability, that goes into that. It's a shared ledger that cannot be disputed. Basically, the trust is absolute. Think about it this way. Bitcoin right now, the total capitalization of the Bitcoins being traded out there is a little bit more than 1 trillion US dollar. Now, 1 trillion, that's 1 million 1 million, just for benefit. Now, you can obviously imagine all the good white hat hackers, anybody who knows how to spell computer, and all the serious black hat hackers in the universe would do nothing more, would like nothing more than to cut themselves a piece of that pie, right? There's $1 trillion waiting to be had. Nobody's going to defend this. It doesn't belong to a company. It doesn't belong to a government. If you hack it, you get to keep it. Nobody ever came close. And as long as quantum computers do not fundamentally change the world of cryptography, nobody is going to get close. That is how much trust you can have in the system. Forget the technical explanations. Simply think, if there's $1 trillion to be had and without risk, because nobody's going to chase you for it, because there's nobody who can sue you for it, so then wouldn't all the world's best technologists already have taken it if it were possible? So that is the level of trust you can have in this technology. And immutable is actually automatic. Yeah.
Harry, here's one question which is maybe fitting well. We have two questions already, but I start with one. Maria, thanks for asking. She was asking if this is a book of rules, right? And now you mentioned also the trust thing, and everyone agrees on what's into the book, right? What does happen if different people have different interpretation of the information? Can that happen? And
this is software. This is not me calling you and we're doing a telephone conference and agreeing. This is software agreeing on the way you book a transaction purely autonomously on the software level. So there's not much room for interpretation here, no. Because the fact is, again, let's stick to the very simple example of Bitcoin. I send the Bitcoin, I have it, I don't have it, it arrives, it doesn't arrive. That's about it. And I just spend it once. So misinterpretation is not possible here because the blockchain happens at the software level. Any interpretation or misinterpretation will always happen at the human level. It will not happen in this case at the software level. Okay, immutable, by the way, that is not new because any accountant here in this group will tell you that has always been the case. Nobody since 400 years ever is allowed, legally speaking. It's possible, but legally speaking, you basically get fired, disbarred, and know what? Nobody ever changes an accounting record. You add a correction record. So that's actually, it comes with the territory. You cannot do ledger bookkeeping if you do not keep the records untouched forever. Now, however, comes the big, big, big revolution that came after Bitcoin. And it came by, at the time, 18-year-old young Russian, Vitalik Buterin, one of the geniuses of our times. And he added to that, he created a blockchain called Ethereum. Do look it up. It is where all the action is happening right now. And that he added smart contracts. The name is wrong, but think of it as software on blockchain. So now not only does this thing do one thing and that very well, transfer a coin from A to B, no, you can now in this transaction, you can put your own code. You can program this. You can program it for business logic, for whatever logic you can possibly think of, you can program this now. And now the world is your oyster, at least if you know what programming and software is. And that's when it became interesting for myself. Because all of a sudden, you can make this thing do what you want it to do. And that is where really when it exploded. So all the big stories, except for the money aspect of Bitcoin being more valuable than last month and more valuable than last year, except for that, anything you hear about, NFT, anybody heard of it? I don't know. Decentralized finance, DeFi, smart contracts, if any of those buzzwords ever came your way, it's purely due to this Vitalik Buterin and Ethereum. And most people, whenever you see any kind of blockchain being used in the industrial world, 60 to 80% of the examples will be using Ethereum or a dialect thereof. Okay, enough history. Now we come to this block story. Remember the chain of blocks? Now we come to the next 4 slides, I believe, are the slides where it gets probably, now it gets technical. And I promise after that, it's going to be better. But these 4 slides, if you can drink your espresso, drink it now, because now is when you need a little bit more of alertness than the 5 minutes before and the 10 minutes after. So you have a block. And in that block, remember, it's a box in which you put transactions. And after all of the transactions have been put in there, you try to achieve the consensus, and then you commit it to the blockchain and add it to the chain of blocks. Now, how is this magic possible? So first, to define what a block is. Think of it as a piece of paper or something you enter. It has a number, serial number. From block 1, the Genesis block, it's really called that way. Then it has a nonce, think of it as a random number, but a number which you will know is unique. And it's a number that will somehow be relatable to time. Then you got the data. Just for readability purposes, we put names and very simple numbers in the example to follow, but normally you would see a transaction here. So for instance, Harry sent Asma 10 euros because Asma gave Harry a book. That would be an industrial blockchain kind of transaction. And then at the bottom of this comes the hash. And this is the single most technical concept which you must remember for blockchain. Hash, hash, hash. So afterwards, if there's a one piece unclear and you want to just understand it, you don't need to understand any of the other cryptography. Just please make sure you understand what a hash is. I'll try to explain it. You have a document, a contract, and then you have some mathematical formula that does the following. The document can be very long. It can be 5 gigabytes long. That's a long document, but anyway, has a lot of videos and pictures. So it can be 5 gigabyte long, and then you switch on this mathematical algorithm, meaning system, and it runs some very fancy mathematics, and it comes out with a number that is limited in length. 256-bit is usually. And this number will have the following property. If it will be unique to that specific document, in the sense that if I change one single bit in that document, the hash will be completely different. It will not even be similar. It will be completely different than if I didn't change the one bit, let alone I change a lot. And of course, because the number is very short, there is no way in the universe that from the hash, I can recreate the original document. So what does that give you? The one is this basically unidirectional, and the other one is it's completely linked together. What it allows me to do is it's a very nice way to verify that something we agreed upon really has not been changed. So the example would be, Sophia and me, we sign a really complicated contract with a lot of private things that is nobody else's business. And now we run a hash on this. Sophia takes a hash, I take a hash, we shake hands and walk away. 5 years later, Sophia is really pissed off at Harry and basically, no, this guy I don't want to make contracts with. And she tries to break the contract. So she says, no, that's not the contract I signed. And she rewrites her version of the contract and goes to court. But then Harry, who knows what a hash is, goes, no. Show me that document. I run the hash. Okay, this hash comes out now, right? And the hash algorithm is it's public, you can check it. And then you run the hash and you compare it with the hash that Harry has in his pocket, which of course both of us probably put in a notary or something. And then we compare, that's not the original document. And until Sophia comes back with the original document, all of the hashes in the universe will break. So it basically makes sure that this data has not been changed. And the big advantage is, remember the big document? I don't have to do endless document comparison. Calculating a hash is a very fast thing to do. So it can be done in microseconds. And that's another beauty of it. And last but not least, because if I have the hash, I don't have the original data, so it's actually a very safe thing to do. So that, remember this fingerprint function of the hash. It's like a fingerprint. If you have a fingerprint of me, but I am not registered, you don't know who Harry is and you don't have any idea of how he looks. But you know, Sophia comes and says, hey, I'm Harry. No, you're not Harry. My brother comes and shows you his fingerprint. No, you're not Harry. Then Harry comes and gives you his fingerprint. You must be Harry. So that's how a hash works.
Harry, so I would never do that, but we have a few more questions, so I would never fake it. First of all, there was one question: who is designing a hash? Yeah, is it the algorithm, or who's designing the hash? And how big can a block get? And where's it stored? So these 3 questions I can see here.
Hash is basically the the community of programmers and scientists have come up with a number of hash algorithms. There's mainly two in use. You might have seen the acronym MD5 or SH256. So these are algorithms that are agreed upon all over the world now. They are standard and they're used by everybody. It comes out of computer science and mathematics. It's where computer science and mathematics meet. A transaction has anything between 10 and a block has anything between 10 and 15 transactions. And what was the third question? The second one you mentioned?
Where's it stored?
In the chain. Remember, it's called the blockchain. So it's exactly, and this is where you see it here. There will be this chain, and one block is in this chain, and together they form the blockchain. That is where it's stored. So, and the beauty is for it. So we have one block now. So if I were to change the 5 here, then my hash, and I put this hash in here, I run the hash algorithm on everything except for the hash, compare the hash that I get to the hash that I see here, it'll break, so I know this is wrong. And now let's see how this works over history. Well, now this one has been okay, it's on the chain, everybody's happy, consensus, in the air, harmony. Now we go to the next block, and now we're trying to change here. Harry was originally 100, now he's 200. So originally what happened is we added this block, and we basically, here, this previous here should be, if the graphics would be 100% correct, should be the very same element that you see here. So we add the hash of the previous block into the data of the following block. Why do we do that? Because then when we calculate the hash of the whole block again, it contains the hash of the previous block. Why do we do that? So this hash here is meant to verify that nobody changed the data in here. So that part is hopefully clear now. But because we also include the hash of the previous block in it, and when we validate the blockchain, we always validate every block. We go from the Genesis block all the way from the past until the present, and we do the calculation, look at the block until the hash, calculate the hash of this data, compare it to the hash that I have created in parallel. Okay, go to next. Go to this block, all right, calculate the hash for this data, compare it to what comes out. If it doesn't break, continue. But because this one here now has references to the hashes before, if I change any of the past ones, the future ones will also break, because the data here is already wrong. The hash that was previously here does not equal the hash that I calculate now. So I know whoever is trying to present this new chain into the blockchain is either mistaken or cheating. So, and in a blockchain, this then works, and this is how then the consensus will ultimately be achieved. So there's a lot of actors, a lot of nodes calculating, and there is one here, the smart guy in the room, who says, how about here it says, Harry, here it would say, let's say this one is Petra. So Petra, in here it says Petra owns 1,000, but Petra thinks it would be much better if Petra owns 1,000,000, right? Who wouldn't? So then she tries to create a chain where Petra owns 1,000,000. So she changes the data for Petra, where it says Petra 1,000, changes it to Petra 1,000,000, and tries to create a new chain, and tries to submit that now into the blockchain algorithm. But based on the hashes being compared and the previous data being known, then at some point this will break because of the hash will be unequal, and then all further records that you try to build on it will also break. So you will have a conflict here, and the result is that the chain, she will not be able to present her truth into the overall system unless she calculates faster than everybody else. So this is roughly speaking how the consensus works. So it's meant by it is basic, all of it is based on the fact that the hash can verify that a piece of data has been changed or has not been changed. And a chain consists of blocks where each block, but also the order of blocks is verified by individual hashes. So if any bit in there or any ordering of the blocks is changed, your hash will not be the hash that you received from the previous chain, and you will know somebody's trying to play a trick on you. Okay.
Here's one further good question for the very initial data. So who is verifying if this is correct? The very first, yeah.
Yes, then you come actually to the topic that most people tend to neglect, because just because it's on the blockchain does not mean it's true. My favorite example is I can commit to the blockchain. Harry says the moon is a green cheese. And I would imagine that most of us agree that's not the case. So the simple answer to your question is no one. And this is why, in order to make anything of use with physical delivery of goods, you will also need to verify the physical truth first, create records that have physical truth, meaning signatures by really identified people, data from physical devices where you know it cannot be faked, so that have an identity. And unless you get that before you put it onto the chain, you're completely open to the typical bullshit in, bullshit out problematic that any computer system will present you with. So that's a very important question. And a lot of the use cases that you will hear coming, especially out of supply chain, they tend to not have considered this very important fact. Reality is reality. That's where we live. Reality is not on the chain. The chain is a record. It is never the reality. And if you do not somehow manage to first confirm the reality by signatures or other proofs, then of course, you're not really saying anything true. All you're doing is a beautiful exercise in futility. So
before you go on, also, there were some other good questions. So if we don't get to your question, please let us know that we didn't get to it, and we'll get to it towards the end. But there was a question from Priti, is storage an issue with blockchain? Because it says storage and processing, I see huge spike for both. How real is this concern?
Not really. Think about Netflix. Blockchain doesn't even appear on the post-comma requirements of anything like Netflix or Spotify.
Okay, so
it's big, but it's big by the standards of the 90s. So if I tell you 100 gigabyte or 1 terabyte, you might, woo, that's a big number. But if you figure out how much data is on Google, how much data is on Spotify, data is truly not a problem on the blockchain. The volume of data. Data volume is so cheap, this is not an issue.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a little bit running over time, so I will jump then, I guess, to the one where if any of you are in business and you basically, all of this story might hear interesting, you see all the beautiful hype, but again, be careful. Blockchain is not the golden hammer, which means blockchain is useful for some things, yes, but for some things and not for everything. Most of all, because this is really not in here very much, but if you're in the corporate world, do not try to use blockchain as something to improve. It doesn't work for that. So mixing a legacy system with a blockchain-based system will bring you into a lose-lose situation. Your legacy system will become more complex and the blockchain will become less secure. So it's something that you simply shouldn't be doing. So because blockchain is so radically different in what's called the paradigm, in the way of thinking, you need to reinvent the how of your business, not the what of your business. Your business can stay what your business is, but everything that you know about how you process it now, how your processes and your systems that execute these processes are conducted, you should best wipe from your brain, bring in somebody who ideally doesn't know how your systems work, but knows what you're doing in terms of what is your purpose, what are you selling, and then do it with blockchain on what's called greenfield. That's number one. My strong advice is only do it on greenfield. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of money and get very much less than satisfactory results. But then another couple of good, decision points. If you're doing it in one company, so you know everybody and your IT systems are connected and you have essentially the same bookkeeping system, if that is the case, then don't do it. Meaning, opposite asked, many domains of trust. It's a big word. It means independent companies that do not share systems, that do not share accounting systems, that do not share cashier systems. So if that's the case, and that's where your business is conducting, urban mobility is one of them, supply chain is one of them, then okay, proceed. Is there a gap in trust between the network participants? So if it's very friendly and very close relationships where you basically believe if somebody gives you a record of his database because you've been doing business together for the last 50 years, then probably you might not need blockchain either. And do you need data or procedures to be shared in the network? So do you need to have common logic being applied all over the network? That's another good indicator. Okay, proceed. Do you really need this data to be absolutely tamper-proof? So absolutely tamper-proof, and not like in the corporate way, because in the corporate way, usually how you do tamper-proof is you just basically get a system admin, he's the only one who has the password, and you basically tell him, if you mess with this, you go to jail, and that's the corporate way of doing tamper-proof. But that's not tamper-proof, that's just basically policy. But tamper-proof means it's simply impossible to change. If that is a requirement out of one reason or the other, and usually that will arise if different organizations want to be sure. Because if another organization is not going to be trusting your system admin no matter what, because you're controlling your system admin. And if they're a competitor of yours, you know, what did you tell your system admin to do? So essentially, if you really need to have trust based on immutable, irreversible facts among independent actors, proceed. Is transparency beneficial? Because blockchain, yes, you can hide private data, and yes, it's GDPR compliant before the question comes, at least if you know what you're doing, but it is a highly transparent system. So is that of benefit or not? If it's of benefit, continue. And then, of course, I mean, that's the question you should always ask yourself. Don't just do blockchain because everybody wants to do blockchain. It's the next cool thing to do. It makes a beautiful presentation, and everybody's going to think, whoa, you're so up to the time, innovator of the year, I did blockchain. Do not do that. It's a waste of everybody's time. May the shared data and procedures be visible to all network participants. That goes again on the whole transparency thing. Yes, you can hide the content of the data, but basically the rough patterns and the overall transactions that are being conducted in your network, to some degree or the other, it lies in the nature of a peer-to-peer system. It's pretty much out in the open. And of course, is permanent immutable storage of the data that you put on there acceptable or not? And if all of this ticks a box, and especially the case, are you wanting to do business in what I call fragmented markets? So where you got 15 different companies coming together to deliver what from the customer perspective is one product, bundling, etc. If all of that comes true, you're still not 100% sure that blockchain is really the answer, but at least you should pay some time and have a look at it, because these things blockchain does uniquely well. Okay, I think I've basically already overdrawn my time, so I will now give back the control to my dear friend Sophia and give her back the hosting.
Thank you. Perfect. So now I will share my screen again. Hopefully you will see it. So thank you very much for all the questions. This was amazing, a virtual dialogue, but it's great that you use the chat for that. Yeah, exactly. So we said our idea is to do that more often, right? Because yes, today it was a bit about first basics, about first terms, right? But there's so much more about the technology and also about more, terms which we have to demystify maybe, right? Because there's also a lot of rumors and things in the room. So we would suggest for the next session, and we want to do that bi-weekly, but it's up to you. If you have the feeling this is too often, or no, we want to see you more often, let us know. Yeah, and we do in a second, we do a Mentimeter survey with just a few short questions, but we want to learn what's the best for you, right? As idea we have that we do it 15th of May again, 1 hour, and focus on digital identities. So what is your identity in a blockchain, so to say?